Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Carrie. My husband Dale and I are the creators of the From Seed to Spoon mobile app. And I am so excited for you all to join us tonight talking all about seed starting. First of all, can everybody hear me okay? I just want to make sure. And hi to everybody. We have a lot of people saying hi in the chat and from everywhere. That's great. I'm really excited that we have such a wide variety. We have San Antonio here. I'm here in Oklahoma City. That's where I am right now. Okay, great. The sound is working good. Well, anyways, thank you so much for joining us all tonight. We're going to cover a lot of things tonight. We're going to be talking all about seed starting and yeah, so we're going to jump right in. It's going to be a really good time. So, first of all, this is our app right here. If you don't already have it, make sure you check it out because it is going to help you along this path of getting started growing your own food or flowers or whatever it is that you want to be growing. And it's going to be super helpful and great. So we created this app in 2015 now. And we start well 2015 is when we started growing and we created this app just a couple years into it to try and help make it a little bit easier for everybody else because it was really difficult for us to get started. And whenever we first started going, we bought a lot of transplants. Well, this was our yard in 2015. We had one little teeny tiny garden there. And then over the course of a couple years, yes, this happened right here. we yeah, we got a little bit obsessed and started wanting to grow like one of everything. So it was a lot of fun. And throughout that path, we started growing a lot of our own things from seed for a lot of different reasons. We wanted to try a whole bunch of different varieties, and because there wasn't a huge selection, if you go to one of the big box stores or your local nurseries might have a little bit more of a selection, but really like the seed companies and all that are going to have so many different varieties, some that I had never even heard of before. So I had to on this slide include a picture of my very favorite variety, which is the bright light Swiss chard. It is one that I absolutely love to grow. It is my favorite now, and I had never even heard of it before whenever I first started gardening. So that is definitely one of my favorites reasons why to start growing your own seeds is because there's so many different varieties out there. And really and truly we grow a lot of ours around this time. We're getting ready to start ramping up, starting a bunch of different seeds. And we love to see the green coming up. As you can see in my background, we have a lot of green in the house too, but outside it's not very green. So I love to include a little bit more green, and seed starting helps us see a little bit more green and makes me happier. I love it. And it's just so much fun. And it is amazing to see those little seeds turn into little baby seedlings. It's amazing just going through the process. So if you haven't done it before, you definitely need to. And also, I just love starting seeds because I include my kids in it. I have a picture of me with my son up there. We That was us starting some tomato seeds last season, and they absolutely love to join me getting seeds started. And they always pick out their own varieties too. They always find the really fun, like dinosaur kale is one of their favorites to start. There's like chocolate cherry tomatoes and things like that. Like they get really excited for different names and all of that. So it's really fun, and it's a great way to get your kids involved as well. And of course, saving money is always important too. And starting your own seeds can really, really help you save a lot because whenever we first started, we were buying a lot of transplants from big box stores. I know when you think like $3 here, $4 here, it's not that huge a deal. But if you start adding it up, when you think about it, one transplant versus one packet of seeds, and in that seed packet, you can start so many different plants. So it is, yeah, it saves you so much money to start your own seeds. So, first of all, I do want to go over what some of the things are that you can start indoors versus the ones that you want to wait and do outdoors. So, I put two of very common ones that people have heard of. So, things like carrots are ones that you do not want to be doing and starting indoors right now. Those are ones, any sort of root crops are ones that you want to try and start directly outdoors, and that's because you don't really want to be disrupting their root systems whenever you're going through and transplanting them. So it's not a good idea to do that. So we always do our root crops and anything like that. We transplant them, or well, we start them directly outdoors. And then indoors, we start more of the things that maybe take a little bit longer to get started, or if you want to get a head start on your season, it's another great benefit of seed starting. So we start tomatoes and peppers like really early and then grow them for a couple months indoors and until they get to be, a good sized transplant and then plant them outdoors. So things like tomatoes, bell peppers, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, all of those things you can do and start indoors. And it's a really good way to get a head start on your growing season. So it looks like we have lots of places. I'm really happy that everybody's joining us. It's so great. So, one thing I wanted to focus on too, a lot of people always struggle with knowing when they can plant. And this is one thing that I know we struggled with a lot as well whenever we first started, because all of the seed packets always say like 2 to 3 weeks before your last frost or something along those lines. And every single time it never failed. I had to look it up and like calculate out. I'm like, okay, now what is that date again? Where am I? What day am I supposed to be doing this? And yeah, so that is one of the biggest reasons why I always use our app, because it will pull from our closest weather station and it'll calculate out those dates exactly for you. So spring frost, it will go ahead and calculate out those dates directly for you. So it'll say, like in this image up here, it'll say January 22nd. So it calculates all of that for you and it takes the guesswork out of it. So amazing. So it's really important to make sure to start your seeds at the correct time, because you don't want them to be on both sides. You don't want them too small when you're trying to transplant them outdoors, and you don't want them to get too large inside and have nowhere to put them. So you want to make sure that they are the right size whenever you're going about transplanting them outdoors. So starting them at the right time is really important. And knowing exactly what the weather is going to be in the future too can really help as well, especially for things that are a little bit more sensitive, like tomatoes, peppers, those things like that. You really want to be looking at the weather. And if you weren't aware, there is actually a weather button in a weather tab in our app that can tell you what the weather is going to be today or for the week, and what the prediction is, and also time below, like certain temperatures that can be good for plants or bad for plants. So make sure you check that out. So a few of my favorite seed starting supplies are the Park Seed Biodome. I actually just started using this last year, whenever we joined Park Seed, and I absolutely loved it. I was really surprised because we had always used just like the regular, just the big box store ones where you just pick them up and they're just so flimsy. I'm sure you guys all know what I'm talking about. I feel like we barely got one use out of them before they were falling apart, if we even got one use out of them. Sometimes they broke mid-season and I'm like, oh no, what am I going to do now? Have to go buy another one or something. But these ones are so strong and have done amazing. Like I have zero issues with them now, and we've had them for a year now, which is great. So I love the Biodome. It makes it so much easier. It has the tray and then the little plugs that go in to start your seeds. And they already have holes in them as well to plant your seeds. and it has a lid up on top as well, and even vents too. So it really helps to keep that area really humid and moist, perfect temperature, perfect everything for your seeds to germinate. And I've had a really good success rate with them too. Um, and I will mention too, in this picture, I have a grow light. And I definitely recommend getting a grow light if you are wanting to start your own seeds indoors. Or I'll show you on the next slide too, a different option as well. But typically, it's really difficult to get seeds to germinate great whenever they are sitting even on a sunny windowsill. Sometimes you'll have some luck, but it can be a lot more challenging. So I always have either a grow light or something along those lines to help make sure that those seeds get enough light. And in this setup right here, this is actually one that we have right off of our kitchen. So I have a little small area just off our kitchen, so I always see it, and I can move that grow light around and adjust it based on where the seedlings are and how they're growing. And it just, I like having a little small area that's pretty close to where I am a lot. So that really helps. So this is great if you have a small space. And then in the next slide, I will show you our larger setup, which is great. This one, we can make this one full screen. There we go. This one right here, this is out in our garage that we have. And there we have two different setups here. And it was actually really simple and really cheap to set up, which you'd be surprised. It was, I mean, we just collected a lot of these supplies. Some of them we got off of like Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist, all of that. Other things we just got from big box stores, wherever we could find it the best value. But it was pretty easy to piece together. And then we got a lot of these shop lights up here. And the thing that a lot of people don't realize too is that you don't necessarily need specific, actual really expensive grow lights if you are not growing to fruit. So as long as you are just using these lights to germinate your seeds and then you're going to be transplanting them outdoors, using things like this is really, really great. So we use shop lights in here to germinate our seeds, let them hang out in here for a month or two, and then we move them out. And on here, I know it's kind of hard to see, but we have these little levers, these little pulleys that are up here attached to the lights. So that way we can adjust the lights as well really easily. I should have pulled a link for that because we have those, but maybe we can pull a link for that. Okay. But I have those hooked up to the shop lights. And then I can adjust them because while you are germinating your plants, you want to make sure that your seeds, you want to make sure that you have the light like right there, or else you're going to have some issues, which we'll go over here shortly. But you'll be moving those lights around quite a bit. So in this setup, I pretty much have like everything there. And then I also have some fans set up. I have one stationed on either side over here to help with air circulation and all of that. So over here, I have a lot of different things. I have some biodomes to germinate the seeds. And then I have other transplant pots throughout that if I want to up pot them while they're still in here, if I still have to wait a little bit of time, I move them up into little larger containers before I move them outdoors. So that's our grow area outside. I absolutely love it. So a few of the things, if you aren't going to be using something along the lines of the biodome, and they have those plugs already for you. If you are wanting to use something else or little pots yourself, or I saw somebody mention something about using like egg cartons. If you do something like that, any sort of seed starter mix, like this Espoma seed starter mix, that's one that we use quite a bit. It works great. Or you can do something simple like just buying a brick of like coconut coir and using that. That stuff's pretty cool. It comes like really small, like a brick, and you put water in it and watch it expand. It's really fun. But that stuff works really great for seed starting as well. The biggest thing, you just want to make sure that you don't do that you don't add compost at this stage. You want to wait till they're outside. Okay, so I see we have a question. Do you leave the grow lights on at 24 hours? Okay, so actually what we do, we have so on outside in our garage, we have timers set and we do about 12 hours on and 12 hours off. So that way it really helps to make sure that they get some downtime, and it mimics the outside a little bit better. And then I did get quite a few questions as I was reviewing the questions from registration about heat mats. So, heat mats are fantastic, especially if you are going to be doing things that are great in warmer temperatures. So, things like tomatoes, peppers, things like that. Those are ones that we use heat mats for. And now it's not necessary, you don't have to have them, but it does really help to improve your germination rate. It makes it go a lot faster. So we tend to use these for those plants that are the warm season ones. So we use them for our tomatoes and our peppers. And then for our cool season ones, we don't usually do any sort of any sort of heat mats. So here I just wanted to show a little bit of how easy it is to go about starting your own seeds. And up here in the biodome, that you can kind of see those plugs right there. Those are they already have these little holes in them that you just drop the seed into there, and it works so good. Whenever I first got the biodome and started using the park seeds, and I was putting like 2 or 3 seeds in each plug because I'm used to in the past the seeds not always germinating. Well, I was having to go through and thin them down a lot, and because you want to make sure that you only have like one seedling per little plug, because you don't want them fighting over space, because if there's more than one, they'll be fighting over space, over nutrients, over water, all of that. So you want to make sure to try and each one have their own space. So you'll definitely want to do that. So if you accidentally put in more than one seed at a time, you'll need to go through and thin them down. But what I've started to do is actually just put one seed in each little pod there, just because I was getting each one to germinate great. So I was having such fantastic luck. And so I've just been doing one seed in each hole and not having to go through and thin them down. So either way, whatever you guys wanted to do, if you wanted to put more than one seed in, that works good too. Just make sure that you are thinning them down whenever you do. And whenever you do thin them down, like in this picture, make sure you use scissors. If you go through and like tug, you can really disrupt the roots down at the bottom. So just coming through and just snipping right at the base and pulling them away, and that'll be perfect for the roots, and it won't disturb them. And then if they're big enough, sometimes we use those cuttings, and depending what they are, we eat them too. We use them as like little microgreens, or we can give them to our animals outside too. We have a bunch of chickens and pigs and all of that. Yes, I'm just like Nancy up there where she says, "I weep when I'm thinning." Yes, absolutely. I do too. It hurts. It hurts. I hate it. So that's why I always try and find a use for them. I'm like, okay, I need to eat them, or I need to find somebody who will eat them. So we always use them. Or if you don't have animals, or if you don't want to eat them, you can definitely still like compost them or do something. So they don't have to go in the trash. So, I wanted to talk briefly about some of the problems that you could possibly see when starting your own seedlings, and just a few ways to combat them so that way you have as much success as possible. So, this right here is called leggy seedlings. So, this was one of our pictures. It happened to us last year. You see, everybody makes mistakes. It happens to everybody. So, please don't feel like a failure if this happens to you, or if something bad happens. It happens to everybody. So I mean, the worst thing you can do is start over, but there are things that you can do to help combat it as well. So, first of all, with these leggy seedlings, the biggest thing that you want to do to prevent it is to make sure that you have a light source right above where the pods are coming up. So whenever they're germinating, you want to make sure that that light source that you have, that's where these adjustable hangers come in really handy, or that grow light that I have, the smaller one that it's really easy to adjust and lower and up and down. So you want to make sure to be adjusting that as they grow and increasing them, and moving them up as they grow. And that'll really help to prevent this from happening. So what happened with this was the lights were low, but we actually had a bulb that burnt out, and I didn't notice it until it was too late. And then we had this happen. So fortunately, though, for us, we were able to save a lot of these plants. What we did at this point was, of course, lower the light and fix the light bulb that we had burnt out. And then we can put a fan up next to them. So that's where these fans come in handy that I have in our shop area. And I put a bunch of fans up, and they can really help to just kind of make that base of the plant stronger. Because whenever this happens, the leggy seedlings, it's really weak and frail. So if you go out and try to plant this seedling outside, it's not going to do well because it's going to fall over or break. So what you try to do is build up its strength. So make sure that at this point, that if you weren't before, that you are now watering from below at all times. And you want to have a fan going on the side of it and adjust it too. So like be rotating it around so the fan's hitting it from different angles and different sides. And that'll really help to increase the strength of it as well. And then whenever you're going about hardening them off and then eventually transplanting them outdoors, there are some plants that you can plant deeper down into the soil. So things like tomatoes, you can plant a lot deeper than where it looks like you can. So that way you can bury some of the weak part that you have there. And also more things like in the brassica family, things like broccoli, cauliflower, things like that, you can go through and plant them a little bit deeper. So that way they're a little bit stronger whenever you're going through. So there's a few of the things that you can do to help combat leggy seedlings. So Judy says she's made newspaper collars around leggy seedlings and then gently fill the space with a light textured seed starting mix. Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like it definitely would work. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Thank you. I love it, Martha. Yes, I pet mine to give them some movement to strengthen them. Absolutely. I know it sounds silly, but yes, go out there. That's why people always talk about how good it is to go out and talk to your plants and sing to them. It's because of the movement, and petting them will give them movement. It'll build up their strength. So that's fantastic. I love it. Thanks, Martha. So some other problems that you may see are some mold, so some fungus issues and bacterial issues. So this typically happens the second year in growing, or yeah, or later on, but it typically will come from it will come from your seed starting equipment not necessarily being cleaned great. So you want to make sure that at the beginning of the season that you're going through and washing all of your seed starting supplies. So we actually just did this the other day. We go through and we filled up what we did. We took one of our ice chests and filled it up with some warm water and a little bit of bleach, and then went through, washed them all off and let them soak for a little bit, and then rinse them off. And then these are now good. So we have all of our biodomes ready to go. We have the innards of the biodome right there that we cleaned, and then the trays that we cleaned, all of that equipment. You just want to make sure you start fresh with each season. So that way there's no contaminants from before, and that everything is good and cleaned and ready to go. And the other things to make sure to prevent mold issues is always make sure to water from below. So having that tray underneath your seedlings is really important. So again, that's where the biodome comes in so handy, because it has that tray right there that you can pour the water down in it and underneath it, and it'll soak it up. It's so helpful. So having that underneath is super helpful. You just want to make sure not to let water sit in there all the time. Usually what we'll do is we'll go through and water underneath, and then we'll let it soak up water for a while, and then you can get rid of any leftover water there too. And then also having the fan in there too. So this fan that I have in there is for so many reasons, and it will help to prevent mold, because you want to make sure that the top of the plant is not staying super wet and waterlogged, all of that. So having a fan with movement and keeping it dry, but not too dry, you know what I mean, will really help to prevent mold issues. And then if you do get mold issues, you can do things like sprinkling cinnamon powder on top. And also, there's a mixture that you can make of a hydrogen peroxide water in a spray bottle. I think it was 9 parts water to 1 part hydrogen peroxide, if I want to say that. It was something like that. But you mix all that together and you spray it on the top, and it'll really help to get rid of that mold. Because we had it really bad one year when we were first starting out. It was probably our second year. So we had it, and we learned from experience what to do and what not to do. So we made sure we always clean our stuff now. But yeah, doing those things will really help. And if it's not that bad too, you can go through with like a little butter knife and kind of scrape off the top as well. That can just get really difficult if you have a lot of moldy areas. So again, preventing damping off. If you haven't heard of this, this is, again, it's very similar to the mold issues because it has very similar cause. This can happen whenever your plants become too waterlogged and they just simply stop growing and they just don't look good at all. So you want to make sure, again, to be watering from the bottom. And if you are, I would get rid of any excess water as well. So that way it's not staying too wet. And again, that you're preventing the mold issues, because that can cause your plants to dampen off as well. So by washing your equipment beforehand, you're going to prevent that from happening. And then also having the fan going and running will keep them from staying too waterlogged and eventually not growing anymore. So having that fan will help with this as well. And then the dreaded gnats. These guys are the worst. I will say that. We have fought them, I feel like, a lot. But last year was way, way, way better. But the first couple years that we tried doing this, before we had learned some tricks, oh man, it was rough. So now that we have learned several tricks, it has gotten way better, but I still see so many people complaining about gnats and all of that. So I wanted to make sure that we definitely talked about gnats. Again, so a lot of the things that we've talked about before is going to be helpful for this again. So using fans, so having air circulation. Well, gnats, are not that big, so they have a hard time flying if there is a lot of air circulation. So having a lot of fans going around will really help as well. And if you have any sort of infestation too, you want to make sure to do and you can do any sort of food grade diatomaceous earth or ground cinnamon, like sprinkling it on top, because the gnats don't like that. And then also we've used these yellow sticky traps before. Typically we use these outdoors in the garden, and they work really well for capturing those pests, but they also can work in your seed starting area. So you can just put some of these up and it can catch some gnats for you as well. And then one thing I wanted to make sure to talk about as well is that you have gone through all of this work to start off with your seedlings. You want to make sure that they are as successful as possible whenever you are transplanting them outdoors. So you will want to make sure to do what's called hardening off before you put them outside. So this is a process in which it's typically done over about a week, sometimes two, where it's a process of getting your little baby plants used to the outside. So you will start this process for the plants whenever they are at least about an inch tall and they have two true leaves. So I have these pictures down below just to show you kind of what true leaves actually are. So down here, as you can see where the seedlings are just coming up, you see those two little leaves coming up. Those are not quite true leaves yet. You want to look for the leaves that are what it actually will look like whenever it gets older. So you can kind of see one coming up over here in the little tiny ones. You can kind of see a little baby leaf coming up. But in these ones over here, you can kind of see, oh, that they are getting to be a little bit bigger. So they are more about an inch tall. Some of them have more than two leaves. So these ones over here are ready to be going out and getting started hardening off, whereas these ones over here are not. So at that stage, I will start to go through and harden them off. And I will first make sure I wait for a good weather day, and because I don't want there to be like storms going on or to be an extremely cold day that I'm taking them out. So I want to make sure that it's a decent day out that I'm taking them out. And the first day, it's just going to be like a couple hours that it goes out. And I try to keep it in more of like a shaded area where it might get a little bit of filtered sun, but I try to just baby them into it because they've been sitting in either my kitchen or in our garage and not getting a lot of the elements. Having the fan on them definitely does help because it gets them used to the air movement and all of that. But whenever you bring them out, it's just so much different than what they're used to whenever they're going through their baby life. So having them up there, I always try and ease them in. So the first day I do a couple hours in the shade or filtered sun, and then I gradually just go through the week, increasing the time a little bit and increasing the amount of sun that they'll get. And then I eventually work up to the amount or the area that they're going to be in, whether it be a full sun or something like that, and make sure that they are used to where they're going. And then I will go about transplanting them out. But during this process, I will make sure do not set them out just like on your porch or something like that, because you'll be devastated if like a cat comes through and hits them or something. Put them somewhere very safe. Trust me, I learned from experience. And we always make sure we put them behind our fence. We have we have a fence all around our garden area, so that way our cats and our chickens and all of that can't get in there to hurt these anymore. Okay, so Andrea says, do you set them out in the morning or afternoon? So typically whenever I'm starting off, it really doesn't matter too much, as long as the weather is decent and it's not like too hot in the afternoon or too cold in the morning. I really just go for a couple hours, typically midday, but there's really no purpose. It's nice weather at that time. And then gradually I'll work up to setting them out in the morning and taking them in at night before I go to bed. It's really just going to be variable on how your weather is and your location that you're gardening in. So I do see that there's a lot of questions popping up. So don't worry, we're going to circle back around and answer a lot of these questions too. So don't worry if I haven't answered something that's going through. So I do want to mention just a little bit about outdoor seed starting too, because of course, everybody's going to be doing outdoor seed starting, I assume, too. That's so much fun. So just a few tips and tricks for doing outdoor seed starting. I will say a few of the things that people typically have issues with starting are things that have to be started outdoors. So things like carrots can be a little bit more challenging because you have to make sure that the seeds stay moist while they're germinating in order for them to come up. And sometimes it can take a long time for carrots too. So what I do for these is I put some burlap on top of it and just water that burlap in. So it helps to keep the soil moist. And it also helps to discourage things like pests, so like birds or cats, things like that to be, or even squirrels, rats, you name it, to be like digging through and getting your seeds while they're germinating. So the biggest thing with putting this burlap down, you do want to make sure that you do remove it whenever the seeds have germinated. You don't want that burlap sitting on there whenever they're, sprouting up. But while they are going through the process of germinating, this is perfect. It helps keep the soil moist and helps to make sure that those pests don't get any of your seeds. And other things too, if you have any sort of really small seeds, I love to use what's called seed tape. So it's super easy. It's almost like a toilet paper mixture. And I have a picture of this here in the center. And if you have like those real small seeds, so we typically use it for things like lettuce, carrots, those ones that have like the really tiny seeds that are harder to handle. And we just lay them out in strips like this, and you just cover it right up just like that. And they grow so well, makes it super simple and easy. I absolutely love it. It is, yeah, it's great. The first time we used it, I was really confused. I was like, how is this even going to work? Because I'm putting like toilet paper. It feels just like toilet paper, but it really does work, and it disintegrates right into the soil. It works really well. So I highly recommend that if you want to have them laid out really nicely. And then I did want to make sure that I mentioned the seeding square. The seeding square is super fun to use, and it is super helpful if you are doing square foot gardening, which is something that we try to do a lot of, which is a really big space saver too. If you have a small space, and it really helps to make use of the space that you do have. So we do a lot of square foot gardening, and this seeding square really helps a lot. And our kids absolutely love the seeding square too. It helps get them involved. We actually have more than one, so that way our kids can all have some. And we actually taught them their colors on these, because as you can see, like there's different circle colors. And we told them put a seed in every red circle, and they would go through and do it in every red circle, or so on. And they would count as well while they're doing it. So it's really great. And all of these things too, we do have the seeding square available in the Park Seed store as well. And seed tape, Park Seed sells all seed tapes and these smart pots as well. And make sure that you use the code SPOON15, and you can get 15% off your entire order. So if you are interested in any of those things, make sure you save that code, because it'll save you a lot of money. And that was about it. We're going to circle back around and answer some questions, but I wanted to make sure to make a call back again to the app, and make sure, if you don't already have it, make sure you do download it, because it will really help making a lot of this stuff a lot simpler. And I try to, I know I didn't talk a lot about it, but there's a My Garden section in there that you can put in there whenever you start seeds, and it will show you exactly when your seeds should be sprouting. And then ultimately, it'll also show you when you can expect to harvest them, which is great, because typically I start so many seeds, I always forget when I started that. So I can always just look back into my garden and see, okay, when did I plant those carrots again? When are they going to be ready? Because I always forget. It never fails. Yeah. So that feature right there is super helpful for me. And we have some really exciting new features coming out soon. So we should be releasing some new AI features. We're going to be having what's called Growbot. It's going to be helping answer questions. So you can kind of chat with Growbot to ask any sort of questions that you may have, and Growbot will answer them. It's pretty cool. I'm really excited for everybody to see it. It should be coming out, hopefully rolling out this next week. So be on the lookout for that. Okay. So, do you have any future plans to offer a garden mapping feature, particularly for help with companion planting? Okay, awesome. Yes, we definitely do have future plans for garden mapping. It is one of our next features that we are going to be working on. I know we already have a companion planting section for each plant where you can go through and see the friends and enemies, all of that. So, in the meantime, that will really help. Like if you want to go to tomatoes, if you're planting tomatoes, and you can go see the friends and enemies, all of that. So that'll help. But yes, we're definitely looking at making it a little bit easier and making a garden mapping feature, so that way we can chart out exactly how a garden would look. But we would love to hear your ideas, April. If you want to email us, and if you have any ideas on how you think it would work, we'd love to hear from you. You want to pop up our email and.
One moment.
He's working on it. Okay. There right there is our email. It's info@seedtospoon.net. So send that over. We'd love to hear any sort of ideas or any suggestions you may have as well. Okay, so Crystal is struggling with companion planting and spacing. Okay, so I will say, I know we just talked a little bit about companion planting. On each plant in the app, if you have the app, Crystal, and you go through to like, so if you're planting, I don't know, say, I know we just talked about tomatoes. So if you were planting tomatoes, you could go to the app and click on the Friends tab, and it'll show you which plants would help for that, and then the enemies will show you which ones would not help for that, or which ones you want to avoid planting next to them. And typically, whenever you're companion planting, you do want to look at like how big your tomato is going to get, because if you have like a huge tomato, you want to be sure that you don't plant like a basil like right underneath of that tomato, or else you're not going to really see it and be able to use it a lot. So you want to make sure to put it just a little bit away from it, and I try to keep them in the same pot to just to make it a little bit easier. But again, things like tomatoes and basil and marigolds, like all of that, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the same pot to work. You can put them in like separate pots, so that way you don't really have to worry about spacing, and you just put them together in their own little patch and put your pots all together. So maybe that can help you with your spacing out a little bit. Okay, Jill wants to know, can you grow carrots from seed inside? So, I mean, technically you can start them in by seed inside, but I would not recommend it. Any sort of root crops are not going to be easily transplanted outside. So whenever you go about transplanting, so things like carrots, radish, beets, things like that, it's going to be really difficult to get them transplanted without disrupting those roots. Now, not to say that it's impossible. I mean, you can. It's just a little bit more difficult. I would definitely recommend starting these from seed outdoors instead of doing inside. What's the ration of water to bleach? I think we did about 9 parts to 1 part. Does that sound right? Yeah.
Same for hydrogen.
Yeah. Oh, yep. And same for hydrogen peroxide. Yep. Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Is your grow area heated? So we actually have heat mats out there for some of our grow spots. We have heat mats whenever we are starting our tomatoes and peppers. So things that like the heat, we use are heat mats. And then for everything else, we don't use any sort of heat mats. And we do this in our garage, so it doesn't have any extra heating or anything like that. So sometimes we do. I mean, I do start things in our kitchen as well. So obviously, in there is a little bit heated, but a lot of our area is outdoors in the garage, so it has some protection, but it doesn't have any sort of heat or anything. Just the heat mat for tomatoes and peppers. Okay, Pat wants to know, how long do you keep seedlings out in the biodome? Okay, so this really depends on the type of plant that I'm growing. Um, so things like peppers and tomatoes, I'm going to be starting and having them in the biodome probably for like 2 months. I mean, for it's going to be a long time because I'm going to start them earlier, and they're a little bit slow to grow. And I try to grow them in the biodomes that have actually the larger size sponges, because there's ones that they have 3 different size sponges. And I try to do the larger ones since I'm going to be growing them a little bit larger. And then the other ones, things like broccoli, cabbage, kohlrabi, things like that, I typically just start them for germination just to get them going inside, because they'll germinate a lot faster than in the ground where it's really cold still. And then I'll get them out. Once they're an inch tall, I'm already started working on hardening those off. So that's going to be typically a couple weeks or so, up to a month. I'll be planting those out. So, I mean, again, it's really going to be different for whatever it is that you're growing, and also your weather in the area. So if your weather is looking really good, you may want to get your tomatoes out sooner. Yeah, so it really just kind of depends on weather and what type of plant you're growing. Okay, Miranda wants to know, what about starting broccoli? I have never had success. Oh no, I'm sorry. So broccoli, I mean, there's really nothing super special about starting broccoli, at least indoors. I always just I put 1 or 2 in each of those little biodome plugs, and then whenever I'm sprouting it, I keep it covered so that way it is as moist as possible in there. And always does really well, at least in the biodome for me. And then once they sprout, I take the biodome lid off, lower the lights down even more, and then and then it does really well. Okay, my seedlings seem to get stunted after I transplant them. How do you avoid that? So it's really important. Again, I know we talked a little bit about hardening off, but I can't stress that enough. You always want to make sure that you are going through at least a week of making sure that those transplants are getting hardened off, and that they're getting used to the temperature out there and the wind and everything like that. Now, it is going to struggle a little bit in the beginning. It can, especially if it's a little cold out. So you want to make sure that the temperatures are really good. So especially if you put out things like peppers or tomatoes, whenever it's under like 50, it can definitely have issues. So you always want to make sure that you're paying attention to the weather as well as making sure you actually go through that at least week-long process of hardening them off. Okay, Dawn, how about seeding flowers? Is it the same? Absolutely. I have grown an entire biodome filled with just zinnias and marigolds and nasturtiums, all of those. I had a lot of that. And flowers do fantastic getting started in the biodome. And again, you just want to go about hardening them off before you put them out. And I do have a video out. Maybe I'll try and find the link and post it. But I do have a video going over all of those flowers and planting them in the biodome, because I planted a lot of them for reasons, for companion planting reasons. And so that might be super helpful for you all too. Okay, Judy wants to know, you can mark a calendar with the day you planted, how long till emergence, and when to transplant. I sometimes list days to maturity, but it never works. Yes, absolutely. I struggle with this also. I can never remember. I always try and take a picture too, but um that's why one of the reasons I love our app, because I go through into the My Garden section and I put in there on the day that I planted, and I make sure I put the date and then mark that it sprouted whenever it sprouts, and it usually works pretty well. Yeah, it should be pretty good. So make sure check out our app and see if that might help you a little bit too, keeping track of it and predicting whenever you should be able to harvest. Okay, Jennifer wants to know, what is the most important care after seedlings have been transplanted to be sure they are successful? So I would say the biggest thing is just to make sure that they are keeping watered. You don't want to shock them, and because they're used to getting lots of water at their roots too. So you want to make sure that you're giving them plenty of water, and I always water like around it as well too, so that way it's going down into the roots. So keeping it moist will really help them be successful, and also just letting them get settled into their area first before you go about fertilizing them. A lot of people want to fertilize them right away as soon as they get them in the ground. I usually wait a little bit, and just to make sure that they can get settled and all of that. Also, just sometimes protecting from the wind. If you have like a super strong windstorm or anything like that coming in, you can protect them, putting some sort of protection around them. We've done like coffee cans before, or like a 2 liter 2 liter around it. 5-gallon jug. We've done lots of things like that just to kind of help ease them into the transplanting process if there's any sort of storms or anything like that coming. Okay, Lori says, how high tech do I need to get with seeds? Light, temps, humidity. Can I do it without special tools? Okay, so you definitely do not need to be high tech. But the biggest thing I will say, I would recommend that you do get some sort of light, whether it be shop lights or grow light. You can do whichever, but I would definitely recommend having some sort of light source, just because you can put it like right on top of the seedlings. And I would highly recommend checking out the Biodome. It is super sturdy, super durable, and it is great for it's really great for germinating seeds, because it really helps to keep the humidity in place with that lid on it, and it has vents. Like, it is super great. But you definitely don't have to get super high tech with any of this. So it can be as simple as planting seeds and doing it. So I highly recommend giving it a try, and then just keep trying. Everybody has problems, so okay. Do you use grow lights before the seeds germinate? So yes, I always do. There are some seeds that don't necessarily require light to germinate, but some do. So I mean, I really just do them for all of them. I always just go ahead and plug in our timers whenever I do put them in, because I want to make sure that even if, whenever they do germinate, that they're getting the light right away and I don't forget to come back. Yeah, knowing me and my memory, I always try to make sure that I stay on top of it. So whenever I put them out there, I just instantly always put on the lights. So sometimes it's not necessarily, you don't always have to do it, but I always do. Okay. I think we're wrapping up. I'm not sure if we have any other questions, but we are approaching 8 o'clock. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming tonight. We have to go get our kids here at 8 o'clock, so we're gonna be heading out. We have 5 of them. They are hanging out next door, including a baby. So I thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. And if you didn't get your questions answered, don't worry. Make sure you can still leave them on here, and we can come through. And I'll be making a bunch of videos this season too. It's going to be lots of videos coming out. So make sure, if you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, check it out. And we'll be posting lots of videos. And make sure you follow us on social media, and we'll be answering lots of questions there. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye.